So one of the tools that creates the most anxiety for people who are new in Photoshop, I think, is the pen tool. So in this episode, I'm going to try to alleviate some of your fears about the pen tool because it's an instrument that I use constantly, and I think once you're comfortable with it, you will too. So the pen tool, you can access by just hitting P. And if you're over in the paths palette, that's where you're going to see all of your paths coming up. Now, the first thing you want to do when you have a pen tool is zoom in to the area that you're going to be pathing. Today we're going to be pathing this bottle. So zoom way in so that you can really see what you're doing. If you're way out here, you really don't know where your path is actually going, and you're probably inside or outside the edge of whatever you're pathing a little bit, and that's not good. So I like to zoom in. I can't say if this is 100% or 200%. I guess this is actually 533%. So don't be afraid to really get in there. And then hit P, and the first thing you're going to see is this little pen tool with a little asterisk to mark that you haven't made any spots at all yet. So the first thing that I do is I path on an easy to path area first. So a straight line or a simple curve or something like that, but really you can start anywhere. And I try and put the point right on the edge of whatever I'm pathing. If you're pathing something and you want to change the color of it, it's even sometimes better to path just outside the line too, so that you know that you don't have any bleed over or anything like that, and you can always clean up the paths after the fact. As soon as you make the path, it's going to create a new work path. The work path is going to only be active when you're actually selected it. If you have it selected, if you go off of it, it's going to start your work over. So that first point that I made now went away. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this point. And then I've got this little line that follows me around, and that makes pathing a lot easier for me. This is only available in Photoshop, so if you're working in Illustrator or something like that, you won't have this available to you, but I think it's really helpful when you're editing photographs. So the settings that I use for the pen tool are, I have this little gear up here in the preferences pane for the pen tool, and I always have rubber band turned on, and that's what's going to get me that little line. And then I also have auto add and delete. So if I make shapes within shapes, I don't have to do any selecting about what's the interior shape or what's the exterior shape. Photoshop's just going to automatically subtract anything that I path. So like if I made a circle and then I made another circle inside of it, it's automatically going to subtract the inner circle from the outer circle. So we'll have like a donut shape or something like that. So anyway, back to pathing. I'm going to put my first point down. And then usually what I do is I kind of look for an area that's going to be easy enough I can imagine a curve going across. So like right here, I can see there's not really going to be one nice curve because it kind of looks like there's a bit of a kink in the bottle shape in the way it's turning. So right here, I can envision that this is one easy curve. So then what I do is I set another point down holding my mouse down or your pen tablet down. And then if you click and drag, what it's going to do is bring up these handles on either side of it. While I'm still holding it down, I haven't let my mouse go yet. I can then rotate my mouse around, and that's going to allow me to move the curve of this second point and first point to create the nice smooth Bezier curve that I need to make that look nice. Once I have it in an area where I like it, like right about here, I'm going to let go. And this just kind of comes with practice when you'll find out how far you need to drag the Bezier curve. For bigger curves, you're going to need to drag it more. For smaller curves, you need to drag it less. Basically, the shorter it is, or the closer it is to a straight line, the less you need to drag it out. And the longer it is and the more of a curve it is, the more you're going to need to drag it out. So I would, if someone was just getting started in pathing, they might just draw a straight line, but then you can see down by that other Bezier curve that the pixels actually go out 2 or 3 pixels beyond where the line is actually drawn. So this is going to be a bad path if you were to just click one point. So I'm going to click right here, right where I can see that nothing's going to get messed up. Actually, I don't like that, so I'm going to do Command Z and back up. And I'm going to try it again. And this is the good thing about pathing, is you can go back and forth in time while you're pathing to make sure that you get it right the first time. So I'm just going to take my time. This one's an area that I can do with just a straight line. And right here, it doesn't go up very much, so I'm just going to make a tiny little Bezier curve. And now I'm going to hold down spacebar because I'm almost up to the edge of the page. So if I hold down spacebar, that's going to bring up my hand tool, and I can drag things in. Then I'm going to hit Z to get in a little closer, and zoom in and go back to P. And as long as I haven't clicked off of my work path, I'm still going to have the pen tool on this point the next time that I hit P. So now I'm going to click and drag just a little bit more, and I'm going to zoom back out. That was just to make sure that I didn't screw up that one little detailed area. And then I know that this is supposed to be a straight line, whether it is or not, because it's a label. So I'm going to actually just go all the way up here to the top of this label, right until where there's a little bit of a lip, and click one time right there. That way I know that's a perfect straight line. And then I'm going to just click and drag, click and drag. Now here's the spot where you're really going to need to know how to envision a curve. So it's actually really pretty possible to do something like this, but I think and make a curve across this whole area, but I think it gets a little harder to manage because you have to get the Bezier just perfect. And it is good to path in as few points as possible because it makes the curve the smoothest. But I think in this case, I can get away with something like right here, and it may try and connect the curve that way. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag out in the direction. I usually go along the line of whatever it is that I'm making a curve of. And that's a good way to make sure that the curve ends up where I want it to. See, if I had started to send the points out this direction away from the bottle, that's when it's not going to make any sense. And if I send it sort of at an acute angle like that, it's never really going to line up either. But if I send it in line with whatever I'm pathing like that, as close as possible, then the curve just kind of lines up perfectly like that. And then I'm going to let go. Now, but see how it's screwed up what I want to do next, because I need to make it do sort of an S curve to go up the side of the bottle. The way that you can get around this while you're pathing is if you hold down the Option button and hover over one of your handles. That brings up the direct selection tool, or I'm sorry, the anchor point tool, which is just this little caret that appears when you hover over a handle. And while I hold down Option, I can click and drag this back a little bit. And I want to drag it basically in a straight line. If you envision the two handlebars connecting in one straight line, and that's going to keep the curve smooth still, but this isn't going to influence the rest of the curve as much. See, now it doesn't want to necessarily drag out as much. See how it wants to drag out because it's influenced by the handlebar. So I'm going to drag the handlebar back, and now, actually I'm going to drag it back a little more. There, now we have something where we can draw a Bezier like this. And now the 2 points are going to connect in a nice smooth line. But you can already sort of start to envision how if I let this go like this, that one handlebar that's right next to where my mouse is going to influence things too much. So I'm going to actually, rather than letting go and then holding Option, before I even let go of this first point, before I even finish clicking this point, I'm going to hold down Option, and it's going to allow me to move just this one handlebar back while I'm still making my point. So I'm going to send that handlebar in the direction I want the curve to be influenced and let go. And now, see how it's influenced in the direction that I want? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to envision a curve that goes the opposite direction. And I'm going to click and drag down like this. And that's how we've made that nice curve. And I'm going to keep going around and doing that. Hopefully that made sense. Now, see, it's not quite perfect, but we can clean this up in a little bit. It's really, really close. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of turn things off, pause the video right here while I go through and path the rest of this out. Like I said, you want to do this in as few points as possible. But as few points as possible for you to feel comfortable. You don't want to be going like this because you can see how that's jagged. But in areas where it gets more complicated, you can use more points. Anyway, I'm going to pause the video so that we can get through some of this, and then I can show you some of the other points to the pen tool that'll make your life a lot easier. Okay guys, so I'm almost finished with pathing this. I thought I'd just turn the video back on to show you what happens when you get to the end of a path. See, this is where we started our path out. So what happens is you're going to see the pen tool turn to a little icon that has a circle that lets you know that you're closing a path. And that's the only thing that you really need to do is just close that path down. So now we're going to have a little outline around our entire image that shows us that we've got a path. Now it still says work path, and remember, if you were to click off of this and then start pathing again, it would actually delete all of your work. So the first thing you want to do when you have a path that's finished that you like and that you want to save is to double click on the work path, and that'll ask you to save it. So I'm going to name this bottle. And now we have this perfect bottle. So now if you click off of that and start pathing something again, it'll make a new work path for you to work off. If you are selected on the bottle and you path on it, it's now going to actually add to your bottle path that you already have. So make sure when you're pathing things that you're on the right pathing layer. So let's see here. I think the next thing that I want to show you guys is, so you've got this path, and one of the main things that you want to do with paths is you want to make selections of things. That's the whole point of paths. And you want to separate things with your selections. So what if I wanted to subtract out this label or something like that so that I could change the contrast of the bottle, or maybe I wanted to change the label color or the saturation of the label. It's got a little bit of a yellow tinge right now. What if I wanted to desaturate that to a pure black and white? Well, I wouldn't want to have to deal with pathing things twice because I already have this whole outline of the bottle. So why don't I let the path work for me by creating a new work path where I just path out the parts of the label that aren't already pathed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the edge of the label here and create a path for this part of the label, right, like that. And then I'm not going to worry about pathing as a perfect line that takes this 90-degree angle because it takes time. And yeah, sure, this is an easy example, but you're going to run into more complicated things too, where you don't want to deal with pathing something with a complex edge twice and making everything line up. So you just don't have to. You can let the path do that for you. So I'm going to make a nice line along the edge of this label, and I'm going to make it line up right there. And then I'm not going to worry about what happens on the edge of the label here. I know it's going way into the white space, but that's not going to matter. So now I'm going to label this because it's done. I'm going to label it label. And then to make a path turn into a selection, what you can do is just control click on it and hit make selection. When you're making a selection, if you want it to be nice and smooth, what you want to do is feather it by about 4 pixels, which is what I have entered in right here. And always turn on anti-aliasing or else you'll get a really jagged edge because it's only going to grab whole pixels. We don't have any paths made right now, so it's going to force us to make a new selection. So I'm going to hit OK, and that's turn that into a beautiful selection. So that's how we would select this label, this path, exactly how it is. But what we could do instead, I'm going to deselect this by hitting Apple D, is what if we selected the bottle first and hit Make Selection, and then we wanted to just select the label. Well, the label is within the bottle, so what you could do is do Control click Make Selection while you already have your first selection made. And let's grab the intersection of these two labels with still the same settings turned on. And instead of grabbing, adding to or subtracting from or anything like that, it's just going to grab that one area where the two are combined and sit within each other. So now we have the perfect label. If you turn Quick Mask on and off, you can see what is actually really perfectly selected and what isn't. And this is a nice way to sometimes clean up your masks. So if I hit Q, that's going to turn on Quick Mask. And now I can see that I just have that label selected. And it's really pretty darn good. We could go back through and clean this up a little bit. I'm actually not going to worry about it right now, but you could go back and clean your path up a little bit. And the way that you can clean paths up is select the path again, zoom in so you can really see what you're doing, hit the pen tool again, and we're not going to make a new path. We're going to hold down Command, and that's going to bring up our direct selection tool. It's going to change from a pen to a white cursor, and that we're going to click on the path, and that's going to bring up all those points that we had before. And that's going to allow us, if you hold down the direct selection and grab an anchor point, that's going to allow us to move our anchor point. If you grab, if you hold down Option like we had before, remember we were manipulating those handlebars. If you hold down Option when you have the direct selection, the direct path connected, you're going to be able to manipulate those handlebars just like we were before. So now I can just move that point in a little bit. And it looks like now we're actually outside of the line here, so I'm going to grab the direct selection tool again and just tweak it just a little bit. And this is where it becomes a little tedious, but it's worth it to get the path right. So see how that's messed up this path? So now I'm going to grab this point and just drag him back to where he needs to be. And let's see here. Let's grab, oops, sorry. Yeah, right like that. And then I'm going to grab this one, holding down Option, and just pull that back a little bit. Actually, looks like we can't pull it back because of the curve it's on. This is what I was saying before, where you want to path on as few points as possible, but the fewer points that you path on, the more exact your path and all your points have to line up to be to make the path work nicely and line up nicely without adding any extra points. But that actually looks better. So let's make a new selection again and see what that's like. So I'm going to make a selection of the whole bottle. Then I'm going to select the label and do Make Selection, intersect with selection. Then I'm going to hit Q to go into Quick Mask mode, and it's a lot nicer than it was before. So yeah, that looks really, really good. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to keep this. Let's maybe go over to our layers panel, and I'm going to select a new adjustment layer down here by this circle that's kind of cut in half by a darker semicircle. And I'll hit hue and saturation, and now I can desaturate that part of the label. Now that is a minor change, you can see, but it does get rid of this blue cast in the label. And the nice thing about that is now I could quickly do a command click on the hue saturation and recall that exact selection without having to do the path selections of selecting the bottle and then selecting the label and hitting intersect. You don't have to do that. So sometimes I'll actually just sort of save my selections in certain layers. If I know I'm going to be using them over and over again and it took a couple steps to get there, it just saves you one step down the line to save it somewhere else first. All right, the next time around, I'm going to go into how you can make other types of selections and how we can refine those selections. So maybe we'll take a really complex selection and path it out and maybe see what we can do with it. I would encourage you to use the pen tool as often as possible. It's so helpful for making selections. And if you get into professional retouching, it's going to be one of the tools that you use the most because you need to be able to make good selections of all your products. Usually when you're doing professional retouching, they're going to ask you to do exactly what we just did, where they're going to ask you to make an overall outline of everything. In the case of this image, they would actually probably not only ask you to path each bottle, but then to path all three of the bottles together as one path. Since it really is one shape that's not interrupted, they would want one path of all of that, one path of each of the bottles, and then one path of the components of each bottle, like each label and each cap, and maybe even a rough selection of the liquid inside each bottle so that we could quickly change the liquid if we need to. If you get all these paths set up in the beginning, it makes any of the retouching or adjustments down the line a lot faster and easier to deal with. So get very comfortable with pathing. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave questions in the comments section and I'll try to answer them. I know that the pen tool can be a little bit complicated, but I'm sure if you get used to using it, it's going to become your best friend. Alright everybody, I'll see you next time.